Hey boys and girls, and welcome to the review about the NIKKOR 200 to 500 mm. The lens is so special due to its focal length and offers a great value for money. You can buy this lens for about 1,400 euro, and if you want to test it in advance, make sure to stop by at Frankfurt's best camera store, GM-Foto, near the central station. Enjoy this review now! This lens is made for sport and wildlife photography, so as plane spotting. We were not able to fly to Kenya to test this lens on safari, but we heard about 3 lion babies at the zoo in Frankfurt. On our way to the zoo, we did not have any problems at all by carrying the lens with its weight of only 2,300 grams. Easy weight for this kind of focal length. That's the 200 to 500 mm lens from all sides. Really important aspect is that this lens feels valuable and not cheap. If you need a filter, it might get expensive since you require a 95 mm filter thread size. The lens hood is included, but not cheap if you lose it. During our review, it went off 2 times since it got loose. The zoom ring had a pleasant resistance and did not get loose during transportation. With just 1.5 hand twist, you can step through the entire focus range using the manual focusing. On our side is a focus distance indication which allows you to go close as 2.2 meters to your subjects, which will be discussed later during this review. The tripod mount is included as well and supports you during long days of shooting. Feel free to attach a quick release plate to your lens or use it to carry the lens around. We noticed that the screw got loose once a while and we had to tighten it. At the left side is a lock switch for the focal length. You can also make use of the great inbuilt image stabilizer, which supports 2 different modes. With the other 2 switches, you will be able to change from autofocus to manual focus and change the minimum focus distance. That's about it. The 200 to 500 mm covers a great focal length, ideal for wildlife spotting and your next safari. For our test, we used the Nikon D850. Let's see how far you get using this lens. Starting at 200 mm, over 300, 400 and 500 mm. Using more than 45 megapixels, you can still crop a lot using Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop. Let's take a look how this lens performs with chromatic aberrations. Since you bought a lens which is made of high quality glass, you don't get any kind of magenta and green edges. Most lenses tend to have dark corners while shooting at the fastest aperture, so as this one here. You can solve this kind of issue using Adobe Lightroom, or if you stop down to approximately f9. For those of you who are in love with baby animals, will be happy now to see these 3 newborn lion babies. We probably should have taken a faster shutter speed for some of these photos. But anyways, now it is like it is. The photos are looking great, and handling wise, it's a great lens, which is not too heavy for this kind of focal length. The focus was not the fastest one during live view recording, but since no one takes photos on safari in live view, it doesn't really matter. The focus worked great using the optical viewfinder. The closer you get to all animals, the more you benefit of having a great blur background. A great lens if you ever plan to make a trip to Africa. Sharp photos and videos are guaranteed, and I put a link in the description below so you can download some of these files to review them at home. We were able to focus while standing 2.2 meters to our subjects. That's pretty close for such a focal length. You might risk that the llama is spitting onto your front element. I recommend that you start taking photos at 200 mm before losing the overview, since you might be too close already. As I have said before, the focus is not the fastest one during live view recordings. That might be an issue if you plan to use the autofocus or tracking feature for video recordings. Taking photos using the live view is not recommended. Anyways, since most of the animals would have been gone by the time you found the focus. One of the best features of this lens is its image stabilizer. It allows you to compensate for stops. This is an important aspect while filming or taking photos with longer exposure times. Since we are dealing with a relative slow aperture and long focal length, which is not ideal for shutter speed and ISO settings, it is important to have a solid image stabilizer system. For some photos it might be handy to have a tripod to your hand, but for safari shots it's definitely not, since you need to keep track of speedy leopards and other fast-moving animals. You can choose between a normal and a sport mode. As you can see from these results, the vibration reduction does a decent job. One of the most important aspects is the sharpness when buying an expensive lens. We did not notice any major difference in terms of sharpness between its fastest aperture of f5.6 and f8. The center seems to be as sharp as the corners, which is important since we're having a relative slow aperture of f5.6. Pointing the lens into the sun will give you the ultimate lens flare. I really like these kind of lens flares, most during portrait shootings. There are lenses which handle the lens flare better than the NIKKOR 200 to 500mm, but how often does it happen that you point this lens straight into the sun? There are better lenses than the 200 to 500mm for portrait shootings. Nevertheless, I would like to give you some example shots for those of you who are planning to get this lens for wedding photography. Despite the fact that you can get pretty close to someone's face, you first need to get far away to have an idea about the actual photo. Taking photos with a full frame body, like the D850, will give you a great looking bokeh with sharp looking people in the center. However, I would rather go for a 70 to 200mm f2.8 or f4 than this one here. As you have seen on the people shots, you can get a great and soft looking bokeh. The closer you get to all your subjects, the more you will be able to isolate them, thanks to the relatively close minimum focus distance. That was a review about the NIKKOR 200 to 500mm lens. Using the cheaper 150 to 600mm version by Tamron and Sigma won't allow you to attach a 1.4 teleconverter onto your lens. That's possible only using the NIKKOR 200 to 500mm for all APS-C and full-frame cameras by Nikon. This lens offers a great weight to focal length ratio, which is great if you travel a lot. I would say that the main purpose of this lens would be for wildlife and sport photography, for daylight situations, since we only have an aperture of f5.6. The sharpness is great, so is the bokeh, and the image stabilizer does a fantastic job. After using this lens for several hours, we were happy having a fast working autofocus system with a reduced speed during live view. We are definitely convinced of the overall performance. If you want to test this lens out before buying it, make sure to have a look at our rental shop. Thanks for your support, and to Roberto, make sure to follow him as well to get some of his fancy t-shirts from Frankfurt. See you soon and have a great day. Tschüss aus Frankfurt.